Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the deep dive into 1984. I hope you all found the first session useful, and I hope you've all reflected and kind of gone over the knowledge that we went through and done the activities throughout that booklet. I hope you all also submitted your multimodals all good, and I now encourage you all to start beginning thinking about preparing for your trials over these holidays. So with that being said, let's jump into this session today. So before we begin, let's start off with a warm-up question and let's answer what was on Winston's leg that bothered him and what did this thing represent? So if you guys can type your answers into the chat and I'll just let Wendy in now. Yeah, so type your answers into the chat. So what was on Winston's leg that bothered him? These lack of answers is very, very encouraging. Yes, Jasmine, his varicose ulcer. Nice. Okay, so what did this represent? Or can anyone help Jasmine out in terms of what this varicose ulcer represented? All right, I might just answer it. So we all want to remember that Winston's varicose ulcer represented his repression, okay, and his experiences with authoritarianism and totalitarianism within a Oceania. Okay, so basically we remember that his varicose ulcer was always bothering him and itching him when he was living this lifestyle. However, when he meets Julia, right, and he's in love and he's going through these experiences of love and rebellion, we see that this varicose ulcer stops bothering him, right? It's almost as if it's healed. Okay, so Orwell kind of uses this as a way to represent, the positive connotations that are related to rebellion and love and having this autonomy and individuality within life, okay, which then, shows that Winston is able to heal. It was shown through that he's able to heal, sorry. So yeah, that's his ulcer, and it can be a very good symbol if you're talking about love, rebellion, and this need for individuality and autonomy. So I hope you guys remember that and take note of that. Okay, so that's the warm-up question done. Let's go on. So last week we covered all of this, which is a lot. So I do encourage you to, ask your tutors if you have any questions or just make sure you go over it and make sure you're familiar with all the content. We've talked about context. Okay, so Orwell's context where he was experiencing war. He saw this rising totalitarian and authoritarian regime and that he was fearful of Stalin ideology and the Nazi party. Okay. He was also concerned with the working class and how they were treated within society. So then his purpose was to create a didactic tale against totalitarianism. So we know that his form and style was simple prose and that he produced a didactic dystopian novel. Okay, main characters we talked through were Winston, Julia, and Goldstein. Sorry, not Goldstein, O'Brien. Okay. We talked through a lot of major motifs, images, and symbols, and your job was to find quotes for each one of those. And we've also done a little scene analysis of the 2-minute hate, which was a very key moment to show the party's overwhelming power. Now, luckily this week, we're going to go through a lot less. So we're only going to go through the major themes this week because I thought it would be useful, to just talk through each of the key ideas and how, you could be choosing from these key ideas to write about, but also how you should be presenting them. Now, we need to remember that this is a common module essay, okay? So you're addressing this overall rubric of texts and human experiences. So it's really important that your key ideas are, very closely linked to the rubric and its rubric words. So it's really important that we know how to tie in these key ideas to the rubric. So we're going to go through that towards the end of the session, but we're going to start off with talking about the key ideas. So one main thing I want you guys to think about with these themes or experiences is that they are experiences. Okay, generally when we're talking about an essay, we talk about writing body paragraphs and using themes for each body paragraph. So there's no surprise there. Okay. However, this module is a bit unique in the fact that it has a lot we need to address. So you kind of want to be addressing these themes as experiences. Okay. So within this booklet, I've already given you the key ideas, okay, or key experiences that you want to be talking about. The manipulation of language, intimacy and the need for human connection, rebellion, the need for individuality, control of information and history, and technology being everywhere. Okay, so these are the key themes. However, within this module, I want you guys to address these as key experiences. These are experiences that Winston goes throughout his journey of self-actualization. Okay, so you want to be talking about these ideas as if they are situations that Winston is in, and then you link this to the rubric and the rest of the rubric words in terms of, what these experiences bring out within Winston. Okay, so this is where you then begin to address, is it an individual or collective experiences? What emotions are brought out? What values are brought out? What qualities are being brought out? How does this inspire Winston's motivation, his behaviors? Okay, so we want to be linking these rubric words back to this idea of the experience, and then the experience is the essential themes that we're talking about. If the question doesn't ask you necessarily about experiences, okay, so like let's say the question talks about, how does 1984 reveal the complexities of emotions? That doesn't mean you ignore this idea of experiences. Okay, you still talk about these experiences or these themes. Okay, you just need to make sure you've made a very distinct link to emotions. Okay, so we'll talk about that a bit later on. However, going forward, I want you guys to think about these themes as experiences. Okay, so let's start off with the manipulation of language. If you turn to page 31 in your booklets, I've created a table where we talked about individual and collective experiences for the manipulation of language. So here, with the manipulation of language, Orwell comments on the importance of free speech and thought when it comes to forming a sense of individualism, as well as our freedom and autonomy. Okay, so let's talk about where we see this in the book. So Orwell creates newspeak within Oceania where language is reduced. Okay, and we see examples of this through quotes such as double plus good. So language is described to be cut down to the bone and to narrow the range of thought. Okay, so essentially we can see that language is a powerful tool where the government has kind of manipulated it to make sure that individuals lack their individuality and their own expressive thoughts. Okay, so this is what we'd say is the collective experience within 1984. So if you were to introduce manipulation of language within your body paragraph, I would definitely recommend talking about it as the collective experience at first, and talking about how, within these parts, especially where language is used as a tool for manipulation. Okay, so this is the collective experience. In your booklet, I say Orwell proposes that as language is manipulated to make it impossible to conceive rebellious thoughts, any society can become shrouded in ignorance through its disillusioning impact on the anomalous protagonist Winston. Okay, so obviously take it throughout your own words, but this is then the individual side. Okay, so we then see Winston's individual experience as well and how he reacts to this manipulation of language. Okay, so let's go over that again. The collective experience being Orwell uses 1984 as a cautionary dystopic tale, commenting on his own context's growing experience of political and social views being manipulated at the hands of a government. All right, so this is represented through newspeak, okay, where language is reduced. Then we see individual experiences through Winston as in terms of how, how a person would react to such manipulation and how a person would react to such overwhelming control. So that's how I'd structure your body paragraph. Go from collective to individual, and then what the effects of each are. And here we've snuck in some quotes for you to use already. Okay, so next we have intimacy and human connection. So intimacy and human connection obviously plays a very, very big part within 1984, whether we're talking about the lack of intimacy and human connection, or the amount, the prosperity of intimacy and human connection, where we see Julia and Winston's relationship. Okay, so the world of 1984 in particular paradoxically lacks a sense of community and human connection, allowing respondents to consider the value and necessity of interpersonal connections such as intimacy, loyalty, love, and belonging. Okay, so does anyone have any idea as to why this lack of intimacy and human connection may be paradoxical? So I put here that it's paradoxical, but can anyone tell me why? Or anyone take a guess as to why or how? So here's a hint. Think about what relationship does exist. What relationship, is permitted within the party. Okay, so maybe let's think of it this way, right? A paradox, remember, is like opposites, right? Something that doesn't make sense on the surface level, but then once we unpack it, we realize it's a paradox. So the party, restricts all these intimacy and human connection between its citizens, right? So we know the citizens of Oceania can't have relationships with one another. So this is the rule they're enforcing. They're enforcing no relationships. However, what we kind of subtly realize as the audience, however, the citizens of Oceania don't realize, is that the only relationship that exists is to the party themselves, right? So loyalty towards the party is the only relationship we see within 1984. And this can be represented as paradoxical because, a place in Oceania where, all relationships are banned, yet we do see one relationship, but this relationship is ultimately towards the party. Does that make sense? So this is what we call paradoxical, okay? So again, I want you to look at this book holistically and look at this theme holistically, right? Orwell is saying a lot more than just like a forbidden romance, okay? Orwell is commenting essentially on this vital need for intimacy and human connection within all humans, okay? When we talk about Winston and Julia's relationship, it's not just a rebellious act for themselves, it's a rebellious act that represents the greater good, okay? If we're linking back to context, which you should be in your body paragraphs, Orwell was commenting on, his fears about the oppressive Nazi ideology and Stalin's regime, okay, that he was fearful that was growing, right? And he was fearful of what it would do to the relationships we have and maintain, okay? So we see this within the book because Julia and Winston's relationship is depicted as a positive thing, okay? Again, flashbacking to the first question I put out to you guys within this session, Winston's varicose ulcer has been healed during his relationship with Julia. So this represents the importance and the good qualities of this relationship, okay? So he's doing a lot more than just presenting us with like a love story. He's presenting us the need for love and the need for human connection. And that's why we here kind of consider the value and necessity of interpersonal connections such as intimacy, loyalty, love, and belonging, okay? So if you're talking about this through collective and individual terms, throughout Oceania, loyalty is only seen towards the party, and this is the collective, okay? So this is the collective experience of only loyalty, whereas Winston's individual experiences are his rebellion against the party with his relationship with Julia, okay? Highlighting the need for intimacy. So that's how you would address it within your body paragraph. Oh, I don't know what happened to my slide here, but that's okay because it's in your booklets. So if you guys turn to page 34 within your booklets, let's just look at maybe a quote and technique together as to how you could analyze this intimacy and need for human connection. I'm sorry about this slide. I don't know what happened. Okay, so let's look at the second quote together and highlight as you go if you find anything useful. Now, this analysis is not for you to copy and paste into your own essays. Again, it's used as a reference, and I want you guys to be able to change it into your own words. However, let's just see how we've analyzed it first. So let's look at the second quote. What overwhelmed Winston in that instant was admiration for the gesture with which Julia had thrown her clothes aside, seeming to annihilate a whole culture, as though Big Brother and the party and the thought police could all be swept into nothingness by a single splendid movement of the arm, a gesture belonging to ancient time. Okay, so already such a powerful quote, right? Talking about how, Julia's throwing her clothes aside for Winston, of course, is merely not an act of love, but an act of rebellion and an act of, annihilating this whole oppressive nature of the party, representing this need for intimacy and human connection. So this use of imagery and vocalization from Winston's perspective captures the free bodily component of Julia in moments of lust and desire. The significance of her free embodiment and her embrace of lust reinforce how freedom and autonomy are foregrounded as the key to dismantling the perverse hierarchical structure dominating Winston's world, aka the party in 1984. These concepts of lust, desire, and connection lie at the heart of the human experience. Okay, so notice how we're, addressing this idea of the human experience, okay, always linking back to that. Their attempted removal compromises the integrity of the individual experience. This use of figurative language reveals the ways in which manipulation of the past incites uncertainty as to the trajectory of one's own life. Considering this element of the text to our contemporary world, consider how the timeline of one's human experience are recorded digitally. Does the deleting of a photograph figuratively delete a memory as though it did not exist? What defines the outline of our own life in our world? Okay, so the latter part of this analysis is just more to get you prompting thought, okay? So thinking about, the just overwhelming impact that these governments have on us, right? However, focusing on the first half of this analysis, okay, it's really important to think about this idea of lust, desire, and connection that lies at the heart of the human experience. So we're basically saying that, again, this idea of intimacy and human connection is super important. And without it, what do we become? Okay, cool. So that's intimacy and human connection. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave in the chat, but let's go on to rebellion. Okay, so also, before we go on, sorry, I've just left some questions for you guys to complete for homework to just, reinforce your understanding of all these themes, as well as practice writing body paragraphs. Okay, so obviously there will come time for you to write your essays. However, this is a very good opportunity for you guys to solely focus on working on your main points and arguments for each experience themselves. Okay, and, gathering your quotes and evidence for each experience. So with the first two themes / experiences, we've already given you quotes that you can use and sample analysis. So I do recommend kind of reading over that and maybe changing that into your own words, taking what you like from this sample analysis and putting it into your own words. Okay. With question 1, what does Winston's paradoxical behavior reveal about the impact of government control on people's relationships? And from the point of view of the state, why is it beneficial for the citizens of Oceania to treat each other as comrades? Okay, so we've already gone over these points or touched on them, so it should be okay for you to answer. And then lastly, you have a body paragraph style question where I want you to apply your knowledge of love and human connection and write like a body paragraph. Okay, so Orwell comments on the paradoxical nature of the human condition. How is this explored within 1984 through his revelations on the needs for human connection? Okay, so you're not only talking about the experience of love and human connection, but you're also talking about the paradoxical nature of the human condition. Okay, so it's really important that you understand what's paradoxical about the human condition within 1984. Now, on top of that, you also need to make links to other rubric words as well. So emotions, values, qualities, motivations, behaviors, inconsistencies, anomalies, whatever you can put in there. Make sure it's meaningful, but make sure it's plentiful. Okay. So that's why I personally believe that common module is a harder module to do, because it's just so much to cover as compared to like textual conversations and a critical study. But yeah, so that's for homework for you guys to do. So let's keep going with rebellion now. So throughout 1984, we see this need for rebellion, and when living in a society that disrupts autonomy and individuality, this is the only way we can claim back our rights as human beings. Orwell explores this idea with the hopes of inspiring his own audience to take action. So I'm opening this question to you guys now. Where can we see examples of rebellion within the book? And this shouldn't be a hard question to answer. So I'm expecting an answer from at least everyone. So yeah, everyone think of an example where we see rebellion. And it could be something that we've already mentioned. That's completely fine. I guess that shows me you're listening. So yeah. Okay, cool. We've got 2 Winston's diaries, 3 Winston's diaries, Winston and Julia's relationship. Nice. All right, cool. So I definitely think that these are all great examples and that these are all examples you should be including. So rebellion's an interesting theme as well, or experience, because it can tie into a lot of different themes, other experiences or themes. So with Winston and Julia's relationship, as Lynn has mentioned, this is something we've just discussed about the need for human connection. Okay, so you can tie rebellion into all these different themes as well. Okay, talking about the need for rebellion. However, you can also talk about the need for rebellion as its own like body paragraph as well. It is up to you guys. Nothing's stopping you from doing that either. However, you now have some examples that you consider. So Winston's diary is a great example as well, because it shows his, potential and capacity for individual thought and individual freedom, right? In a world where, this is all banned, his diary is very meaningful. Excellent. So yeah, I just want you to consider with rebellion whether you want to tie it into your other themes as well, or whether you want to, write about it on its own. Because I have seen questions where in the HSC they ask you about maybe solely about rebellion or solely about this idea of rebelling against a party, right? So if you get asked the question about rebellion, I would recommend, immersing it throughout your whole essay. So let's say you've written a body paragraph on the need for human connection, tie rebellion into that rather than getting rid of that and replacing it with a body paragraph on rebellion. So talking about the need to rebel in order to maintain our human relationships. Does that make sense? So let's think of another one. We just talked about the manipulation of language. Okay, so the need to rebel in order to maintain our individual thought. Okay, or the need to fight against the manipulation of language to maintain our individual thought, right? So rebellion can be intertwined with your other themes as well as being its own theme itself. So that's why rebellion's a really good theme. Okay, so within your booklets as well, we've got like a little summary as to where we see rebellion. Okay, now unfortunately we haven't made everything too easy for you guys, so you will need to find at least 4 quotes on rebellion just to help you prepare. And then you've got some questions on rebellion to answer as well. Can anyone think of any other examples of rebellion apart from Winston's diary? Because I don't know how 3 of you guys said the exact same thing. That's powerful. That's some like psychic stuff right there. So maybe you give some more examples just to make it easier for each other about rebellion as well. And then you guys can find quotes for each of those. Rebellion. Do we have anything? So I want you to remember that rebellion can be tied into everything. Okay, so let's talk about like the varicose ulcer. Okay, and okay, so one of the many skills I think you guys want to learn within English is the need to connect one thing to a complete other thing, right? Just through waffling. Not even waffling because it makes sense, but just this ability to kind of draw connections between different ideas. Okay, so let's talk about this varicose ulcer again. Okay, this varicose ulcer represents, Winston and Julia's relationship and the benefits of love and intimacy and human connection because Winston is ultimately healed, right, when he's with Julia. Okay, so we've already established that. So now we know that Winston and Julia's relationship is an act of rebellion, as mentioned by Lynn. So can we not tie Winston's varicose ulcer and make this link that says, therefore, through his healing of his varicose ulcer, Orwell comments on this need to rebel against oppressive regimes and then essentially find love and human connection. Okay, so this is where we can intertwine and overall have this link between themes and examples. Okay, so just learning how to, I don't want to say BS, but I want to say learning how to make connections is a great tool and skill within English, especially when you're analyzing. So yeah, that's another example for you guys already, but yeah, just find 4. So let's talk about the need for individuality. Okay, so a very, very prominent theme within 1984, because we're basically talking about Winston's whole journey here. Okay, so 1984 predominantly focuses on the need for individuality. The essence of Winston's journey is fueled by his need to maintain his autonomy, to make decisions by himself, for himself. Okay, so it's pretty self-explanatory and it's not an unfamiliar theme to you all. Okay, this need for individuality is a prominent theme throughout all texts, and it's 1984 is no exception. Okay, so I think when you're addressing this within your body paragraph, take us through this story. Okay, so not retelling the story, but analyze the story, right? So talk about how we start off by being introduced to Winston as a character who is loyal to the party and his relationships and loyalties lie towards the party. We see this through his unreliable narration. We see this through his first-person perspective. He is for the party, okay? However, we then begin to see, hints of him questioning the party, hints of him wanting to rebel against the party, until we get to the climax of the book where he actually does, okay? And he has, the secret relationship. He has a diary. He's, talking to apparent co-conspirators such as O'Brien, okay? So, this is Winston's like climax of his story. And we see there's a lot of positive connotations associated with his journey of rebelling, okay? Finding himself, finding who he really is, okay? Finding his own voice. So these positive connotations is Orwell's attempts to kind of grasp at the audience and say, this is why you need to be an individual. So we want to say that he's warning his responders, okay? And this is definitely a statement you can make within your essays. He's warning responders of the dangers of a totalitarian regime, one that is so oppressive that it suppresses all of individuality. Yeah. So therefore, it is a good statement to make in terms of showing how Winston's rebellious nature is shown in a positive light, because Orwell is trying to reinforce this idea of the positives of having our own individuality and maintaining our own actions. However, what do you think the effect of, the sad ending of 1984, where Winston ultimately, conforms back to the party again? What do you think the effect of that might be? So why has Orwell chosen to do like a sad ending rather than, going on with this like climax of a happy ending leading towards his individuality? Why has he ultimately chosen to, undo all the progress that Winston had made? Does anyone want to have a guess? To further his message. Excellent, Jasmine. So as a warning, yeah, perfect. So this ultimate like ending in terms of how Winston just, betrays Julia, okay, succumbs to his fears within room 101 is essentially a warning, okay, talking about how right now, at the rate we're going and the rate we're progressing, these party leaders and these government bodies have a lot more power than we do, okay? And if we continue to let them go on, this is what will happen. So no matter how like close we are or how progressive we are in terms of trying to fight for our individuality, if we don't essentially rebel, okay, our individuality will ultimately be completely diminished no matter our efforts. Okay, so we want to say like this whole book holistically again and talk about it as like a whole message for warning, a whole warning for this fight against our individuality. Okay, so by talking about Winston's overall journey and providing me like a quote from the beginning, the middle, the end, you can overall make your point as to what Orwell was trying to say, if that makes sense. So let me know if you have any questions about that, but I hope that's pretty self-explanatory there. Now, I've got some sample quotes for you guys. So I'll give you about like a couple minutes maybe to fill out the first cells of your table. So, and if you don't think you can write fast enough, you can just take a screenshot. But here's a quote. The thing that Winston was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labor camp, excuse me. So we already know that Winston's diary is a symbol for his individuality. So that's your technique there already. What would be a good effect statement for this quote? So what's the effect of this quote in particular, or maybe about Winston's diary in general? Does anyone want to have a go at writing an effect statement? Doesn't have to be perfect, but just generally what the effect of this is. One thing I want to point out as well with this quote is a great paradox here. Nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws, but if detected, it was reasonably certain that it will be punished by death. So look, I know nothing's illegal, but that definitely sounds illegal to me because who'd want to die, right? But this could be a very good paradox within the party's overwhelming control. Okay, so that could be an example there, but just that was a side note. So what's the effect of Winston's diary? Should be pretty straightforward. Anyone want to take a guess? So again, I just want you guys to like maybe talk about what the purpose or effect of this diary was. So what is Orwell trying to show here? And obviously, since we've been talking about this need for individuality and autonomy, you want to link it back to this idea. Yeah, cool. So Lynn wrote, demonstrates the party's overwhelming control. Yeah. So this quote overall would demonstrate the party's overwhelming control. So that's perfect. If we were to talk about Winston's diary more specifically, though, okay, cool. So you could tie it into rebellion, okay, and talk about how, thank you, Jasmine. So yeah, you can talk about how you can tie into rebellion and then talk about how it's this need for individuality and how Winston was on the cusp of now, rebelling against the party, to form his own sense of identity. And then you can go on from there and find more quotes about, the positives and the importance of this throughout his journey. Here's another quote. In the old days, he thought a man looked at a girl's body and saw that it was desirable, and that was the end of the story. But you could not have pure love or pure lust nowadays. No emotion was pure because everything was mixed up with fear and hatred. Their embrace had been a battle, the climax of victory. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act. So how could we tie this into individuality and autonomy? Because on the surface, it looks more about love and human connection, right? So again, we're kind of tying into this skill of being able to like link a lot of different things to a lot of different ideas. Okay, so how could we kind of talk about this in a way that we want to emphasize this importance of individuality and autonomy? Can anyone have a go? Or does anyone want to have a go? So shows how individuality is stripped away by the party. Yeah, excellent. So you can talk about it in a, thanks, Jasmine. So you can talk about it in a way where Winston and Julia's relationship was an act of rebellion for this need for love and human connection. But you can also say it is an act for their own autonomy, their own decisions to pursue something that they love and that they want to do. Okay. So because of this, we see that their climax, which is metaphorical for, their relationship, was a political act, something that helps them fight against the party. So essentially, whilst this is about their relationship and love, it is at the bottom line about their humanity and their autonomy. Okay, their ability to make their own decisions and pursue what they want to pursue. So you can always link this to individuality and autonomy as well, or you can link it to love and human connection, whichever one you guys want. So that's another quote for you. Let's move on to the next theme. If anyone has any questions, let me know. There's some questions for you guys to answer within the booklet about individuality and autonomy. Again, I basically made it so you, unfortunately, but thank me later because it'll keep you organized. But unfortunately, you guys will basically have to write a body paragraph for each of these 6 themes. This is just really good practice for you all. However, I understand that might be a lot. So time permitted wise, write 6 body paragraphs, practice writing body paragraphs for each of these themes. However, if you already know what themes you want to write in particular about, focus on those ones. Okay, put more effort into those ones and make sure those ones are nicer. However, it's not harmful to kind of write at least 1 body paragraph for all your themes, so you can kind of pick and choose which applies better to whatever essay or whatever question you're answering. Okay. However, I understand the stress of trials and I understand that you might not have enough time. So just invest in the ones that you want, you want to write about more. Okay, so let's move on to the control of information and history. So this is a really interesting theme in my opinion, and it's a really good one that Orwell has touched on. Okay, so the party controls every source of information, regulating and rewriting the content of all publications and histories for its own purposes. The party forbids people from preserving any evidence of their history, including photos and documents. As a result, people's recollection will grow hazy and untrustworthy, and they start to believe anything the party tells them. So yeah, essentially, Orwell kind of talks about this control of history as another manipulation tool. Okay, and it's a really smart one, right? From the top of my head, there's a quote from the book that says, like, whoever controls the past controls the present, whoever controls the present controls the future. I think it's something along those lines, but I think that's a really critical quote that talks about this idea of control of information and history. And it's true. If we are able to manipulate history, then we are able to change history, and we can change history for our own agenda and our own purpose. Okay, and this is what we see the party doing. If we flip back to our first booklet and talk about within the motifs, symbols, and imagery, we talked briefly about the ministries and where Winston used to work. Okay, can anyone tell me where Winston used to work? In the chat, where did Winston used to work? And yes, I've given you a hint that it's in your booklets. So You can flip quickly. Yeah, so thanks, Lynn. So Winston used to work at the Ministry of Truth, and his job was to rewrite historical documents. Okay. So again, this is already a big paradox because the Ministry of Truth rewrites historical documents. So what's truthful about that? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so you've got a paradox there already. However, this is where we also see Winston's individual experience being exposed to this manipulation of the truth. Okay, we also see that Mr. Charrington's shop has a lot of significance in terms of history, right? Because a lot of items from there appeal to Winston because they're from a different time, right? Winston seeks out information from the past and he wants to learn about history. However, ultimately, we know that he fails to connect with history. Okay, a big symbol or motif for this is the glass paperweight. Okay, Winston was Winston was first intrigued by this glass paperweight because he believed it represented something from another time. Okay, so this is where we see Winston's first connection and interest in it. However, this glass paperweight shatters. Okay, so the shattering of this glass paperweight ultimately represents, Winston's failed attempts to connect to the past. He can't. Okay, and this obviously ties into this grand scheme idea of how Winston just can't form his own identity and autonomy. Okay, and part of this is because he can't connect to history. So Orwell comments on the importance of history, and I think that is a very smart and insightful comment. Now, within your booklet, rather than giving you quotes from the book in the slide all perfectly tied up in a ribbon for you guys, I have extracts for you all to go through. Okay, so we've got extracts from chapter 3, and what you want to do is annotate and highlight these extracts for key quotes about this control of information and history, and you can use that to answer the following questions as well within your booklet. Let's see what time it is. Okay, so we've still got a bit of time left. Let's quickly read the first extract together maybe and see what we can find. So the thing that now suddenly struck Winston was that his mother's death nearly 30 years ago had been tragic and sorrowful in a way that was no longer possible. Tragedy, he perceived, belonged to the ancient time, to a time when there was still privacy, love, and friendship, and when the members of a family stood by one another without needing to know the reason. His mother's memory tore at his heart because she had died loving him, when he was too young and selfish to love her too young and selfish to love her in return, and because somehow he did not remember how she had sacrificed herself to a conception of loyalty that was private and unalterable. Such things he saw could not happen today. Today there were fear, hatred, and pain, but no dignity of emotion, no deep or complex sorrows. All this he seemed to see in the large eyes of his mother and sister, looking at him through the green water, hundreds of fathoms down and still sinking. So this is an extract from chapter 3 that kind of talks about Winston's only memories from his mom. Okay, and we know that there's this positive connotations towards his mother's love towards him, but this was from a different time. Okay, so the key quote here you might kind of think about is he did not remember how she had sacrificed herself to a conception of loyalty that was private and unalterable. Okay, so we can kind of see that Winston's losing his memory of his mom, and this essentially is him losing some of the only positive memories that he might have within this life still. Okay, so this again renders Winston's lack of individuality and then his ultimate control and conforming to the party, because he doesn't have loyalty to anyone else now because of this manipulation of his history and his the information that he still remembers. So that's just an example there. You have another example given to you, another example extract, but you guys can go through that in your own time. Okay, so I think this is our last theme, which is technology being everywhere. Okay, so within 1984, we see that technology is present everywhere. We see telescreens, especially, is the big one. Okay, so everyone in 1984 is constantly being watched through these telescreens, but we don't exactly know when we're being watched. Okay, so this was inspired by, and I hope you guys remember from the panopticon. We talked about contextually in the first deep dive session, so you guys can use that as a contextual link, right? We also know that there was a big rise in technology within Orwell's time, when we're talking about microphones, the printing press, again, cameras, security cameras and such. So this overwhelming surveillance is just a very big tribute to the party's control, which then again is serving as Orwell's warning of what would happen if we succumb to, you know, Stalin's regime and Nazi ideology. So I think that's, again, pretty self-explanatory. You can obviously tie these themes in again to this need to rebel against such overwhelming surveillance, or you can talk about this need to rebel in order to establish our individuality and autonomy due to this overwhelming surveillance. You can always grasp at these links around these experiences. This is a sample quote for you guys. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque, like a dulled mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. Okay, so this definitely just talks about how telescreen is on 24/7 and could potentially be surveilling you 24/7. Okay, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Again, your job is to find a quote for each of the technologies within 1984. And then, yeah, so find a quote for each of the technologies and then also talk about the effect of that. Cool. So we just went through all the themes in under an hour. Very impressive. So now you should have a good idea in terms of what themes might resonate with you the most and what you feel the most confident about in writing. Okay. I do recommend, and this will go into our next week's session where we talk about essay writing. However, this can be a little snippet now. You will be like, I know you probably get a lot of advice about not memorizing essays, and not, you know, going in and just writing down an essay. And I agree. I don't think you should memorize solely an essay, and I don't think you should just copy it down word for word. There is an important need to adapt. Okay. However, it is unrealistic to expect you all to be able to, you know, come up with a full essay in 45 minutes, right? On the spot. So I do recommend investing time in building your 1984 essays and building these body paragraphs now throughout this week, and, you know, kind of perfecting them almost, okay, and making sure that they are clear and concise and talk about the exact ideas you want to, and then choosing the ones that you resonate with the most and start to learn them and memorize them, okay? So then by next week, when we finish talking about essay writing, you will have full essays and you can just focus on adapting them, okay? So this is under the assumption that you haven't written 1984 essays yet, because I know your schools in Blakers haven't done a 1984 assessment task yet. So, you know, maybe you've gone above and beyond and written an essay already. That's great. Okay, so now it's time for you guys to just keep practicing and learning it and memorizing and adapting. However, if you haven't done one yet, I do suggest spending this week just typing up some general body paragraphs about these key themes, and then have them ready to start adapting. Because, and not to scare you all, you don't have much time left to your trials. Haha. So yeah, let's move on now to what I have prepared for you next. So having gone through these key ideas, we need to be able to write about them in terms of the rubric. So let's go through how this can be done. So, oh, why am I going backwards? Okay, so let's just talk about this little recap. Okay, you have human experiences, which is this core central idea within the module. Okay, and then this core idea branches off into these rubric words. And we've talked about this last session. We talked about how these link to behaviors and motivations, emotions, qualities, values, and individual and or collective. So as a very, very brief and quick summary, you can have individual and or collective human experiences. And by going through these experiences, emotions, qualities, values arise, okay? These experiences can also shape how we behave and can act as like our motivations within life. Okay, so we want to be able to address these rubric words within all these themes. Okay, so it's not enough to just say love and human connection is an experience and that it's individual. Okay, that's you touching like the surface of this module. We want to like dig deeper. Okay, we want to go on a deep dive into this module. Okay, anyway, sorry. So let's talk about love and human connection then, and see how we can link it to these rubric words. So we already stated that on an individual level, love and human connection is a positive experience, okay? And we see Winston falling in love with Julia. On a collective level, we see that love and human connection is only directed towards the party and no one else. Pretty self-explanatory there. Let's talk about complex behaviors and motivations. On one hand, Winston behaves in a manner that favors himself. He follows his heart when it comes to Julia, and this motivates him to rebel against the party. So we see that his taste for love and human connection, this experience, has now motivated him to rebel. On the other hand, love and connection towards the party ultimately prevails as he betrays Julia in the room 101, right? So we can kind of say that his behavior is complex, okay? On one hand, he follows his heart and he loves Julia, yada, 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 right? But then on the other hand, this ultimate, overwhelming ideology and overwhelming control and manipulation the party possesses still causes him to behave in a manner that betrays Julia. So we see his behavior is inconsistent, okay? Another tying in, okay? So his behavior is inconsistent and we can attribute that to the party's control, okay? So again, behavior could be inconsistent. His motivations are linked to his experience within love and human connection. Love and human connection bring out positive emotions on an individual level, okay? So we see that Winston's really happy with Julia, and we see this through all the positive connotations throughout their relationship. However, negative emotions are seen on a collective level, okay? So I think there's a key quote that's like Julia or Winston stating, "We are the dead," okay? That could be a very big homage to how love and human connection on a collective level is rendered diminished throughout Oceania. Love and human connection has been demonstrated to be an important value within humanity and a quality within the human condition that must be maintained. So here, this experience of love and human connection is essentially this value that Orwell is trying to warn us as audiences that we must maintain it, okay? And if we fall into this trap of, an overwhelming authoritarian or totalitarian regime, we lose this vital quality, okay? So I hope that makes sense, right? You can always draw connections within your body paragraph to these different rubric words, and you should be doing that. Again, do you need to have every rubric word within your body paragraph? No, okay? Because I don't think you will have enough space to talk about every rubric word. However, if you can actually make or draw that connection, I highly recommend you doing so, because this just shows how well you understand the common module and how, much effort you've put into learning all these different rubric words. Okay, so I recommend screenshotting this. This is a sample body paragraph that you guys can use. It's not perfect by any means, but this is a little body paragraph that we've written about love and human connection that you guys can have a read of and kind of see in terms of if we've, linked to the rubric enough. I recommend marking it and critiquing it yourselves, seeing how you can improve it. And yeah, I hope it helps. Okay, let's keep moving on. So, and if you need me to go back, just let me know. Let's talk about overwhelming control together. Okay, so let's talk about this human experience of overwhelming control. It's not an experience or theme that we've gone through just yet. So this is something you guys can investigate in your own time if you feel like this is something you can write about. However, let's have a go at linking it to these rubric words together. So in terms of overwhelming control, how can we link this to emotions? Just type it into the chat. Emotions. Lack of emotions. Okay, good. So that's a great start. There's a lack of emotions due to overwhelming control. Okay, excellent. So what about values? How can we link it to values? So again, remember in Love and Human Connection, Orwell was talking about how we should value love and human connection. So if we're talking about overwhelming control, what could we talk about in terms of our values? Okay, so I would kind of restricts the values that society is allowed to have. Excellent, Natalie. So yeah, it restricts the values that society is allowed to have and the values that we hold so dear to ourselves. And then I guess like on the flip side as well, Orwell's exploration of overwhelming control kind of talks about the values that we need to have, okay, and the values that we should treasure. So again, this ties back to this idea of it being a warning. Excellent, thanks, Natalie. So let's move on to motivations. So what could overwhelming control motivate us to do or to behave? So let's tie this in together. Let's do motivations and behaviors together. What does overwhelming control motivate us to behave in a way? Leads to rebellion. Excellent. Second Natalie or first Natalie. I don't know. Other Natalie. So yeah, it causes us to behave in a rebellion manner. And we see this within Winston and Julia. So let's talk about individual. How can we link it to individual? So I'd say with individual, how you can link it is talking more about Winston's own experiences with overwhelming control. And then again, this ties back into his motivations and behaviors, right? So we can say individually, Winston experiences overwhelming control, which motivates him to behave in a rebellious manner. Does that make sense? So we can tie individual always with Winston because we're seeing Winston's individual experiences. On the collective level, overwhelming control is seen to, render the citizens of Oceania as like droids almost, okay? They are constantly surveilled, they are constantly living a life of, conformity, okay? And that's the effect of overwhelming control on a collective level. Overwhelming control in terms of anomalies, I would say, brings out Winston's anomalous behaviors, okay? So let's tie anomalous and inconsistencies together. So Winston's behaviors are inconsistent because we, sometimes see Winston, favoring the party and showing his loyalty towards the party. And then on other times we see that he rebels, okay? And he, fights for his own freedoms and autonomy. A good other character that we can talk about with overwhelming control and maybe inconsistencies or anomalies or even paradoxes is O'Brien, right? So O'Brien, when we first meet him, we meet him as like a co-conspirator, okay? Someone who's also going against the party. However, eventually we see that, like, paradoxically and inconsistently, he's actually a member of the inner party, okay? And everything he's kind of said or led us to believe is all fake. Again, another manipulative tool of the party. So this is how you could link overwhelming control again to all these rubric words, and this is what you should be doing. And I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you guys have any questions about that. Okay, so summary, we're finally at the end of this session. So let's talk about a summary. So within your poly paragraphs, you are addressing these key ideas as human experiences that the character goes through. You must ensure that you're linking to not only the question, but this overall rubric that is text and human experiences, meaning that you should be linking to different rubric words wherever you can, meaningfully, okay? Again, don't overload your body paragraphs with these rubric words. make sure they're done purposefully and meaningfully. However, make sure they are in there, okay? When writing your body paragraphs, think about where you want to start and where you want to finish. It is important that you think of your body paragraph as a whole. A lot of students, I find, kind of just like pick out the best quotes and then just chuck them all in there, but don't necessarily have flow within your body paragraph. You want to think about how your first quote can help set up your second quote, or how your second quote can help support your first quote, or how your final quote can tie all your points together within this body paragraph, okay? So don't be a victim of just listing quotes and listing evidence, okay? You want to think of everything holistically and the point you're trying to start to make and finish making, okay? So, for example, with love and human connection, you might first introduce this experience by talking about the lack of love within Oceania and use your first quote to do that. Then you talk about Winston's experiences with Julia and how he gets a taste of this experience and a taste of human connection. And then you can emphasize the importance of this by showing that it's a positive experience for Winston, and therefore Orwell is trying to talk to us as the audience about, this importance of human connection and the importance of maintaining it by, fighting against overwhelming regimes. So from start to finish, we've given, meaningful thought about how we want to explore this idea as a whole. So that's summary and final tips. So I'm going to hang around for 5 to 10 minutes for any questions. However, if no one has any questions, thank you guys for being a great audience again for this session 2. Next week, we'll talk more about just essay writing, okay, and talking about how you're going to write your common module essays, how you're going to, write an effective thesis statement, write effective topic sentences, and then that will wrap up our deep dive sessions, and then you will just have your holiday lessons with your tutors. So thank you again, everyone. You are free to go if you have no questions, and I will see you all next week at the same time. Goodbye. All good. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'll be sticking around. Cool. No one has questions. Yeah.